Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'm doing one of the longer form podcasts that I typically do once a week, once every other week. Thank you for joining me on a Friday night. Right now, I'm watching my University of Arizona Wildcats playing the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 championship, and it's almost halftime. Right now, it's 6-0 Oregon, so I may be distracted from time to time glancing at the TV. This will be about a 20 to 30 minute video where I get back to all your questions. I've got tons of questions, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get this video done before this week's over. Because I know next week more questions are going to keep rolling in, and I don't want to get behind on this stuff. So, with that being said, if you don't know how this works, if you're new here, first of all, thank you. Second of all, subscribe everywhere. Loosely related to my follow-up, which is available for purchase or giveaways. And no one has won my 150 email challenge yet, but it's still going on. I'll leave it open for the rest of December. If you can send 150 emails to contacts that you find from clinicaltrials.gov. So the aim here is to get more studies for your research clinic or your research company. If you can send 150 emails in a 24-hour period and send me the screenshots, so you might need 6 screenshots, you might need 3 screenshots of your outbox proving this, because I've done this, and I've received dozens of CDAs and feasibility surveys back. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do all these studies for my various clinics all over the country, although I very well might. But it gives me options, and that's what I want you guys to have. A lot of you guys watching, one of your responsibilities may be getting more studies or more business for your clinic. And I'm a businessman first. Before I do clinical trials, I'm a businessman first, right? I kind of wish I wasn't known as the clinical trials guru. I'd rather be known as the business guru first, or the entrepreneurship guru, or the marketing guru. But I understand those fields are more crowded, and I happen to work in this industry right now, so I'll take the clinical trials guru for now. But anyways, long story short, if you can prove that you've done this, not only will you get probably dozens of CDAs and feasibility surveys for you to fill out and give your organization a chance to really start off the new year, 2015, with a bang. You will get a hoodie, a follow-up hoodie, which is valued at $40, sent out to you for free. And you'll get a statue of yourself built in front of the Clinical Trial Guru studio for all to see, okay? But in all seriousness, it's important that we work on getting studies all the time for our clinics, because that is the lifeblood of our business. So with that being said, it's a perfect segue. I'm getting into the viewer emails, and you can always send me an email, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'll keep you anonymous. Again, it's Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I will keep you absolutely anonymous. And Oregon just scored again, 13-0. So let's get right into these questions, okay, before I get too angry. The first one's coming from a doctor who has never done clinical research before, and he has some concerns, and I think he has some good concerns, some justifiable concerns that I'm going to be talking about, because I'm sure other people in his situation are feeling the same way. So again, he's never done a clinical trial, but he wants to do it. He got a study offer, and in most clinical trials, the investigational product is stored at your clinic, and the investigator never has to write a prescription for it. It's just in the pharmacy, in the double-locked cabinet on site. The study coordinator or the PI or the sub-I or whomever the PI delegates can dispense the IP to. Okay, now sometimes, and I would say 10 to 20% of the times, but definitely closer to 10% of the time, the PI is required to actually write a prescription because the investigational product is not located at the site. It's available already on the market. which is the case with this physician's first clinical trial offer. Now, his concern is he's not so concerned about his ability to write prescriptions. He's concerned about possible malpractice because he's in a specialty that does not typically prescribe these meds. And without giving away too much information, because I want to keep both him and the drug company anonymous. His specialty does not usually, actually I take that back, does not ever prescribe this particular medication, but the sponsor will allow him to prescribe this medication for the purpose of the study. So he's concerned about malpractice. Should he write a prescription and something happen to one of the patients who are taking it, he can actually get in serious trouble for malpractice. And so he was wondering if he should let his malpractice insurance provider know that he's doing clinical research. So my answer to that is yes, for sure. And he wants to know if he should go about doing this study. And my answer is it all depends. Okay, the best thing I would do is find a sub-investigator who is an MD that actually specializes in that indication. And then you can have that person write these prescriptions, because you can delegate that duty to your sub-I, because that's more along the lines of standard common practice for that specialty. If that's not an option, because it sounded like that wasn't an option, but what I would do would be to hustle as hard as I could to find a sub-I, follow up. If that's not an option, what I would do is really think about where you're going to get these patients from. So it sounds like they're not going to be your patients because it's not your therapeutic specialty. So if you're going to be recruiting them, you don't know these patients. What you can do as long as you follow the protocol. Okay, here's what sponsors say. In every contract, there's something called indemnification, which means the sponsor and the CRO will hold the PI harmless should any untoward adverse events occur to a patient that have serious medical implications. So SAEs, okay, any injuries related to the study drug while under the study will be covered by the sponsor. So that's one thing, but then you still have the malpractice thing, which may not go away so easily. I mean, these things are usually public record, and if the state of whatever state you're in finds that you've done malpractice, this is a public this information will be publicly available. So yes, the sponsor may identify you, but you still might have some consequences because of this in your state and from your medical board. You may not lose your license. It depends on the severity of what happens. And again, we're thinking worst case scenario, but it's important for you to think that way as well. I would recommend to a first-time principal investigator to pass on this study and just get your feet wet with a more traditional type of trial where you don't have to write prescriptions, especially for a medical indication that you are not a specialist for, just to be on the safe side. However, I can also see how doing this study will probably be a positive thing for you, and you won't have any negative consequences, but there's always the possibility, always, when you're dealing with doctors and patients, that malpractice is gonna come up. And yes, the sponsor will indemnify you. Make sure that's in your contract. For all of you guys watching, make sure indemnification is in your contract. At bare minimum, make sure your medical malpractice company understands that you're doing clinical research, because if they don't, they may not cover you. Should the sponsor not cover you, you definitely want your medical malpractice insurance to cover you. So these are the things I would consider. If you're comfortable with that, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, maybe pass and wait on a more traditional clinical trial. Because again, this is usually not the norm. Usually you'll have the investigational product distributed at your site, and so you don't have to worry about malpractice because you're not prescribing anything, even if it wasn't for your medical specialty. Let's say the study was still not in your medical specialty, but you have the investigational product at your site. You don't have to worry about medical malpractice. Again, I'm not an attorney, but you're not prescribing anything. You're just following a protocol. So it's less of a strike against you should something go wrong, and it's less of a reason why a malpractice suit may occur. At that point, should something happen with the patient, they will probably take it directly with the drug company rather than with you. But still, that still may not be the case in that situation either. So it's a complicated issue. I know a lot of PIs are watching, a lot of PIs who, or a lot of MDs who would like to be PIs are watching. And if you come across a study like this, just be careful. And if you have further questions, I mean, give me a call or send me an email. My phone number is in my bio on the clinicaltrials.guru, and I won't charge you anything for initial phone call. Okay, I do consulting, so if you need my help with that, I can help you. I have a consulting firm. So that's my answer to that, which was a pretty long answer. Let's get into another question. It says, hey Dan, do you have any suggestions for good resources when looking for another job opportunity in research? I would love to get involved with a CRO or a sponsor, but can't relocate or travel much because I am in grad school. Any suggestions are very appreciated. So, and without knowing where you're from, this may or may not be possible. Okay, if you're in a place like Southern California, where you can drive to hundreds of research clinics within a 2-hour trip, I think there's a demand for you to be a CRA, because you wouldn't have to travel at least out of your immediate region. Everything's within a 2-hour driving distance. Same thing if you're in some place like New York City or Miami, Florida. Any place you have a large concentration of research sites, a CRO would like to hire and have a home-based CRA in those locations. Unfortunately, there's not very many good resources, but what I would do is get on LinkedIn if you're not already on LinkedIn, and just put that you're someone interested in being a CRA, and you'll see how quickly the headhunters, because there's tons of headhunters, meaning recruiters on LinkedIn who get paid a commission if they find someone to place for a job at a CRO. So there's tons of these people on LinkedIn. They come at me all the time. Get on LinkedIn if you haven't gotten on there already. As far as that, I don't know any other resources. If someone else does, let me know. That's pretty much what I would do, is get on LinkedIn. And if you're in one of these big cities that I mentioned, do some homework. See how many research sites are there, and call up the big CROs, Quintiles, Par Excel, PPD, INC, Covance, and see if they're hiring in that region. And tell them you can't travel much. You can drive to sites. And again, in a lot of these bigger cities, that might be possible. Now, if you live in Montana somewhere and you tell them that you don't want to travel, guess what? There's probably not that many research sites in your area for you to drive to, so you may not get hired there. So hopefully you live in one of these bigger locations. Let me know. I got another question. This one was actually pretty good. So, any clinical trial people know of any resources for developing budgets for investigator-initiated trials? So I've done a video on this before, and I'm going to send you the link for investigator-initiated trials. Basically, what an investigator-initiated trial is when a physician partners with, traditionally they partner with a drug company. So the drug company will actually fund their research if there's some kind of mutual benefit to both parties. So maybe they're testing either a new procedure or the current drug companies, one of their drug companies' medications for a different indication. Oftentimes, these pharmaceutical companies will actually grant some funds to the investigator for these investigator-initiated trials. So as far as finding a budget for these things, here's my recommendation. My recommendation is to base your investigator-initiated budget off of a regular industry clinical trial budget. I mean, the procedures are going to be the same. Let's say you're doing an investigator-initiated trial for asthma. Find an industry-sponsored trial for asthma. Try to get a sense of what their budget would look like per procedure. So what would a physical cost? What would a lab draw cost? What would an ECG cost? What would dispensing the investigational product cost? Get all those costs together. Put in your overhead, because your overhead's going to be the same whether you're doing an industry-sponsored trial or an investigator-initiated trial, and then see how much staff you're going to need. Are you going to be able to do this with just yourself? Or are you going to need a study coordinator? That all factors into the budget as well. So my advice would be, and I'm going to send you a link to another video I did all about investigator-initiated trials from my blog, but my advice to you would be just base your investigator-initiated budget proposal off of what's already the standard for industry-sponsored clinical trials in your particular country. Okay, if you're in the U.S., it should be fairly easy to do. If you're somewhere else, it might still be easy to do, just less of a sample size to choose from. So good question, and I'll make sure I send you that. There's another one. So compassionate use in clinical trials. So I got another question the other day from someone who, it's actually a study coordinator, and they just finished a study at their site, and one of their patients did really well on the study drug. And so unfortunately for that patient, the study was a fast study. It ended in about 2 months. And then the patient had to go back on their current medication or their previous medication. Now, this investigational product is currently available on the market for a different indication. So this patient was willing to take this medication off label. Her doctor, who happened to be the PI, was willing to prescribe it for her off label because it worked well for her. But when she got to the pharmacy was charging her an astronomical price for this drug because it's an expensive drug. She was talking about like $900 a month, and she can't afford it. So the study coordinator's asking me what I would do if I was in this situation as this study coordinator or the PI. And I actually have been in this situation before. And here's what you can do. There's something called compassionate use in clinical trials, and you'll be surprised. And my anecdotal evidence is back from 2006, so a lot of things may have changed. The Sunshine Act is here now, although I don't think the Sunshine Act applies to this situation. But again, I'm not an attorney. We need to get Darshan Kulkarni on this show. Man, we are long overdue for Darshan Kulkarni to get back on the show. He's been vacationing in every corner of the earth. So Darshan, if you're watching, tweet me, man. We need to get another interview because I'm getting lots of legal questions. But there is something called compassionate use in clinical trials. And it sounds like your particular patient, your study participant, can qualify for this. And what compassionate use is you request, it helps if the investigator were to contact the sponsor, either by phone, email, written correspondence, or all of the above. And you can help out as well as the study coordinator. And inform the sponsor that your study participant just completed their trial. They're doing very well on the study drug. And unfortunately, they want to they want to be able to continue taking the medication, but it's just costing them a lot of money because the drug's not approved, and right now they have to get it off label and their insurance company won't cover it. So how can you help out? Oftentimes, in my previous experience, they will either give you a voucher or a coupon for that study participant so that they can get the medication at a steep discount. And oftentimes they'll do this for a year or 2 years. And the big pharmas they get a lot of flack in the industry for doing a lot of, let's just say they get a lot of negative publicity, okay? But this is one of the things that really goes unnoticed by a big pharma, and you can argue that they have a huge budget, but nonetheless, it could benefit your particular patient here. They actually will do a lot of these. They will honor a lot of these requests. If nothing else, they'll give a voucher or a coupon, could be up to a year or more, for the study participant to get their medication at a steep discount. Or I've heard of cases where they offered the drug completely free for a year or more until the drug is planned to get FDA approval, at which point the insurance company can pick up the tab. So it happens a lot. It's actually a common issue. It doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they can do is say no, and then you ask again. And then if they say no, you ask again. Are you seeing the theme? Follow up, follow up, follow up. So that's what I would do. And I'm really happy to hear that there's study coordinators out there and principal investigators out there who are really thinking of their patients first. It's actually pretty encouraging. So I got another question. A very intelligent person, site director of a clinic, has 3 different trials going on for 3 different indications. And what they want to do is they notice that one of those 3 studies has a radio budget for radio advertising. And they'll pay something like $5,000 for a radio ad campaign. And they have a pre-scripted central IRB approved radio script for that study. Now, what this individual wants to do is create one radio ad that kind of briefly mentions the 3 indications that they're looking for participants for. And because the other 2 protocols don't offer a radio ad budget, they want to bill the first sponsor the entire amount. Now, this person's asking if this is, first of all, ethical. And from an IRB perspective, it is, because if you're not advertising one particular trial, let's say you're just advertising the fact that you guys do asthma studies, you also do constipation studies, and you also do studies for depression, without giving any specific details, IRBs, you're not under the jurisdiction of any IRB at that point, because you might have different IRBs in charge of all those studies, and you haven't gotten study specific yet. However, I guarantee you that central IRB approved radio ad is pretty specific, if you'll notice. And so that has to get IRB approval. So there's a gray area here. What I would do is do the ad, and you can try to build a sponsor for it. And if they ask you for the script you used, I would send them the script that you actually did use. Because you wouldn't want them, I mean, the chances are slim that they would actually hear the radio ad, especially if you're in a location that they don't have much of a presence in. But you still want to do the ethical thing as far as from a business perspective, because if I were that sponsor, I mean, I would probably reimburse you because my study was included in that group, and in our contract we will reimburse for a radio ad. But I would feel kind of funny if I knew that I was also paying for 2 other studies, even though they're not competing studies, but 2 other studies radio ad as well. That doesn't mean they won't do it, but you can first of all run the ad. Okay, I think you should run the ad, and then the question becomes who's going to pay for it. So you're going to have to pay for it up front anyways. Send an invoice to that drug company that has an ad budget, and then hope that they don't ask for your radio script, although they probably will. Well, I shouldn't say probably will, but it's a 50-50 chance that they might ask for the radio script. At that point, you have the ethical dilemma of, do I send them the central IRB pre-approved script, or should I actually be honest and send them the real script that I used? I would go for sending them your real script, although you might get lucky because in your case, if they already have a central IRB script, they'll probably assume that you used it. So run the ad and then see what happens with the sponsor. But if they do ask you specifics, I would be upfront with them and see what they tell you. I'd actually be curious to know. They may not even care. They may just give it to you because it's in the contract. If they don't specify in the contract, you have to use the central IRB radio ad. So technically, you are running an ad for that study. You're just including 2 other studies in there. Gray area, but this is what makes this show good. I mean, people ask real world questions, and you'll get real answers here. And when I can't give you an answer, I will have a guest like Darshan Kulkarni on. Here's another question, and we're getting into the 26th minute of this podcast, and really bad news for any Arizona Wildcat fans like myself. It's almost halftime of the Pac-12 championship game right now, and Oregon's killing us 20-0. And it looks like they're making a last drive before halftime, so it might be a long night for U of A, which makes me upset. But let's get on to these questions. It says, hey Dan, I came across your YouTube channel. Thank you. Subscribe, please. And I just joined and subscribed to your website. Thank you. Thank you very much. I recently graduated with a Bachelor's of Science, and I majored in public health, which led me to research in clinical trials. I wanted to become a clinical research associate, a CRA, but need experience. However, I found another field known as clinical research coordinator. My ultimate goal is to work as a CRA. I wanted to know, would it be better if I worked as a coordinator, then moved up to CRA, or would you recommend me to pursue CRA? And what book would you recommend for CRA training? There is a book for CRA training out there on Kindle. I didn't write it. I'm planning on writing a CRA book soon, but that's going to be like at least a year away. I have so many other books I want to write before that, specifically how to negotiate contracts and budgets related to my previous 2 questions ago. But there is a good book out there for monitoring. Just go on Kindle and look it up. It's like $9, I think. And again, I didn't write it. Now, to answer your initial question, should you be a coordinator first and then a CRA, or just apply directly as a CRA? I would say be a coordinator first, okay? And what I would do is find an organization where you can have a lot of responsibilities right away. So maybe a small to mid-size clinical research site, as opposed to a large clinical research site, because they might just have you very compartmentalized and not give you much opportunity for growth. Whereas in a small to mid-size research site, which are the way my research clinics are built, where we have like 3 to 5 coordinators at any site and a couple of PIs, you actually are going to take on a lot of responsibility early on and have the opportunity to grow and do more. So with that being said, you can add more skills on your resume. And what you really would like to do at a research site, in addition to being a clinical research coordinator, is eventually maybe have some kind of quality assurance experience, so that when you go and apply for a CRA position 2 years later, because that's how many years I want you to work as a study coordinator before you even think of applying as a monitor, is 2 years, okay? So your first year, you're learning the ropes and you're going to be taking on a lot of coordinating responsibilities. Your second year, you want to be doing the same, but also adding some QA, quality assurance responsibilities to your skills. And then you can apply to a CRO for a CRA position. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you need more help. All right, let's get to this one. I got a lot of questions. So here's a similar question. Uh, I'm looking for a job as a CRA. How do I go about it? So check the previous answer. That's what I would do. Uh, Same thing. This other guy wants to be a coordinator. With no prior experience, I have the feeling it is quite hard to break into the industry. Do you think you can provide me with some tips or advice? Yes. Right here. For those of you listening on iTunes, I'm sorry, but I'm pointing to my follow up t-shirt, and for you it should be follow up 100 times. You should have a t-shirt with follow up 100 times on it and actually going around the back too. If you have no experience, and for the guy before you as well, don't just stop at the first 5 interviews that you have for study coordinator. Keep going. Go to 100 interviews if you have to. Offer free internship for a few months if you can. Tell them that you'll volunteer there, and if they don't like your work, they can let you go. They don't have to hire you. There's no risk to the employer. So oftentimes when it's funny how we ask for something, we ask for like an employer to give us a chance, but we provide no value up front to them. So what I would do is provide some value up front. Say, hey, I'll work for you for 3 months for free if you can afford that. If not, you're still going to have to hustle. So my first part of the answer still applies. I'll work for free for 3 months, and if you don't like me, no harm, no foul. I'll go work somewhere else. But if you do like me, then you can hire me. That's what I would do. That's actually how I've hired many coordinators who are still with me to this day in different capacities. A lot of them are QA auditors, site directors. Do that. That's what I would do. Follow up times 1,000 for you. Okay. Last question. Thanks for all your videos, Dan. I've recently started my own site. And as you know, all I do at this point is business development and networking to get study. I was just talking with one site network called PCRS Network. I was wondering if you heard about them. I have not. Any recommendations? No, I have not heard of them. Also, you mentioned in your videos that you're on a list of sites they can send each other studies. How can I get to that list? I am also interested to join your LinkedIn group whenever you establish it. So yeah, big news actually. Either towards the end of December or very early in January, I'm going to be starting a Clinical Trials Guru LinkedIn group. And you can join, but each user is going to have to get manually approved by me because I want the dialogue in there to be genuine and authentic, and I don't want people scared that other people are going to see what they're writing. But yes, I'm going to have a Clinical Trial Guru group where I'm going to have research sites, of course, in there, PIs. I'm thinking whether I should invite CROs and sponsors in there as well for them to share their input, or limit it to just individuals like CRAs. I'm still debating that with my team, but I'll get back to you. But stay tuned for the LinkedIn group. As far as getting on the email list for sharing studies, let me think about that one, because the email list that I'm involved with, there's only 15 people on it at last time I checked. And I didn't start this group. I was actually added in by someone, and I guess that's the way you get in there, is if someone adds you in. So you really have to provide some value up front, I think, because it is a competitive industry, and we're careful about who we share our leads with, because the sponsors have a limited amount of sites that they want to sign up for a trial, and after that, they don't need anymore. So we got to be careful about that, but that doesn't mean you can't start your own group, okay? Or share leads with me directly, and I'll send you some back without having to be in that list necessarily. But what I will recommend, and I will think about it, if you do get in a group like that, be one of the people who also gives studies instead of just taking leads. So I make it a clear priority of mine that when I'm in that group, for every study I receive from someone, I'll send them at least one study, if not 2 studies. That's just how I roll. I really believe in giving more value than you get. I think I tweeted that the other day. If you're on Twitter, follow me, The Real Dan Sfera. But if you give more value than you actually receive, it's going to work better for you in the long run because it's going to compound, and that word of mouth is going to be unstoppable. And just think about when you give someone tremendous value, they're going to go tell at least another person about you. And now you just scaled your value to that one person to another person. And so that's my long-term strategy for not just clinical research, but everything I do. So hopefully this helps. I wanted to wrap this up. It's halftime, and University of Arizona is losing. I'm pretty upset about that, but I had a good time doing this podcast. So I wanted to give my clinical trial guru producers a shout out. Okay, it is Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, PTNR, Erdhart Clinical Research, Tradestone LLC, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, Kulkarni Law Firm, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, St. Paul Medical Research Center, Investigators Research Group, Phlebotomy Services, Atria Clinical Research Management, Rheumatic Disease Clinical Research Center, Clinexus Research LLC, Coastal Connecticut Research LLC. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sending questions. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.